This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, it's Wednesday, it's 9 p.m. Okay, good evening, it's 9 p.m, it's Wednesday, and it's time for the Late Late Show with me, Toby Baincook, and my excellent friend, Ed Finch. We're here, it's Wednesday, we're going to talk about creativity, creative thinking, creative versus artistic, all this stuff that came out of a blog I wrote.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, anyway, we're here, it's Wednesday, we're going to talk about creativity, creative thinking, creative versus artistic, all this stuff that came out of a blog I wrote several weeks ago in reaction to some conversation with Alison Honeybone. Big shout out to Alison again, and also the Labour report from the David Blunkett report, which did refer to a more creative curriculum, but it didn't throw out everything. It was just talking about a little bit more of a creative curriculum than perhaps we have at present. Anyway, so we're going to delve into that in a bit more. I am waiting for the Ed to join. Have I got an Ed? Good evening, Ed.
Good evening.
I've had some problems.
Oh, I didn't. Well, I tell you, I did have a problem. I was sorting out my socks, and then I said to Douglas in the most relaxed possible way. I said, "Oh, Douglas, what's the time actually, mate?" He said 21:01. And then
21:01, and you were sorting out your sock drawer. This is a Labour excuse.
I was taking out socks from the big pile of damp laundry and hanging them up on the socktopus.
Socktopus. Okay, excellent.
You have a socktopus. I love the socktopus.
Is a socktopus a bit like a tree mug, a mug tree?
Yes, but more socky and less muggy.
Okay.
It looks quite a lot like an octopus. It's a good thing. You should get one.
I don't think I've got a socktopus. Is that for drying socks?
Do you know what? I will take a photograph and I will tweet a photograph of my socktopus. I won't make any comment. I'll just put it up there. We'll see if anybody's listening and they see the socktopus. They can give it a cheeky little like or something to show that they're in on it. But maybe we won't spend the whole programme speaking about sock pie though. Or socktopodies,
no, let's
I think it is correct.
No. And so there we go. Right, but before we start properly and delve into this creative thinking discussion, whatever that is, before we dive into that, I want to hear your barn owl impression, Ed.
Well, barn owl. I mean, let's do the tawny owl first, because people are generally more.
Is that less exciting?
Well, I don't know. You could say. We'll let you be the judge of it. First, let's have the tawny owl. Yeah. Or you might have two tawny owls discussing things with each other, in which you get. Yeah, that's two tawny owls there, and that's the sound that most people associate with the owl, as you know. But you know, when people, but people often assume that's a barn owl, and a barn owl does not make that noise, not singly nor in duo. A barn owl makes this noise.
Does it? Yeah, this is for you, Lucy.
Yeah.
Lucy is loving this.
If you're ever lying in bed and you hear what seems to be a certain murder happening outside your garden, it's usually either two foxes getting it on or a barn owl.
That's fantastic. I was going to say, when you were doing your tawny owl impression, that was like that was like slow radio on Broadcasting House on Sunday morning. Richard thinks it was a pterodactyl. Lucy says she's loving it. It's a tribute to you, Lucy. Shout out to lovely Lucy, who listens every week, and Richard listens back every week, and he's not often in the room. So thank you. Good evening, everybody in the room. Right, okay, Ed, let's get going. Right. As I said before you joined us, we about 3 weeks ago-ish, maybe a little bit more, there was a Labour report written by David Blunkett, which mentioned a little bit more creative education. We've spent the last 2 weeks talking about teacher identity and professional identity, which also kind of came out of that. And I wrote a long blog.
Well, Blanket should report more often, shouldn't he? He's set us up for material for a month.
Yes, I know. We need more Blanket,
him.
absolutely. And so yes, and so I then wrote this long blog, which was quite widely of blogs that I haven't written a blog quite a long time. I don't think really. Well, maybe I wrote one just before that about Progress 8, actually, didn't I? Yes, I did. But that was boring. Anyway, this is quite exciting. I find this fascinating, and there was lots of comment and discussion on it. And Alison Honeybone and I had a long discussion about this whole thing. And I think whenever we talk about creative thinking or creative education or creativity, the two words of the late, sometimes great, sometimes not always thought of as great, Sir Ken Robinson,
Yes.
and all that whole, that famous TED talk that he did, which was all about our schools killing creativity. I don't want us to get too drawn into that, because that for me is a bit of
because they clearly are, so we can leave it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
arguments been lost and won.
I think it's more. I wanted to discuss. So what we're going to do, just for listeners, is I'm going to speak for a little bit uninterrupted.
For most of the show.
I'm going to speak for no more than 10 minutes maximum.
Okay. Listeners, set your timers. Let's find out.
And then you're going to come back. And then we're going to discuss it. And there might be some people who, I don't know who all these SNIT, PS, NCs and PIPs,
lots of folks on there.
There's lots of folks. Then just a few people. And there might be some people listening who have been part of the Twitter debate. And I know that some people are going to try and listen. And that Helen, the maths expert, early years, etc. There was a big discussion on Twitter between Helen, who's an early...
Oh dear. Have we lost Toby, or has Toby lost us?
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more.
If you're listening to this, then we know we share one thing in common: a passion for the type of outstanding education that every child deserves. That's what makes us the leading provider of specialist education and care. We need people like you to help us achieve even more. With us, you'll be given all the resources and support you need, offered a clear path to career progression, and be rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. We are Witherslack Group. If you'd like to find out more, we'd love to hear from you. Visit www.witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers and be part of our future.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Scotsman reports on strike action by Scottish teachers planned to take place in the coming weeks. Scottish Education Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville has said there is no separate pot of money to fund an improved pay deal for school staff, and that any improved pay offer would involve diverting cash from other areas. Strike action was announced after recent ballots and will be the first such action for almost 40 years. School staff are due to strike on November the 24th, after members of Scotland's largest teaching union overwhelmingly voted in favour of the industrial action. The EIS union said 96% of its members backed the action via a ballot, which saw a turnout of 71%. The most recent offer of a 5% pay rise was rejected 3 months ago. Ms Somerville told the Scotsman that she was absolutely determined to try to reward staff with a pay rise closer to the 10% being sought by unions, but warned it would lead to difficult decisions in other areas. In Wales, school children have been given the green light to support their national team in the group game against Iran. The Welsh Government has agreed to let schools decide how to manage the timetables during the game, which kicks off at 10 a.m. on Friday the 25th of November. The team is in the nation's first World Cup for 64 years. The FA of Wales has organised a Football Friday for the day of the Iran game. Around 1,100 schools throughout the country are preparing for a full day of football activity. The Welsh FA has created packs including bunting, footballs, flags and posters to mark the event. Skills sessions, inter-school matches and football festivals are also planned for either side of the Iran game. Pupils in both primary and secondary schools are planning to take part in the events. FE Week focuses on the efforts of colleges across the country that have been instrumental in helping refugees from the war in Ukraine build a home away from home in the UK. Since the war began, around 7 million citizens of Ukraine have left their homes and almost 150,000 have found sanctuary in the UK. The country's colleges have dedicated their efforts to laying on ESOL courses to help refugees master English, as well as other learning opportunities designed to help Ukrainians settle in. Whilst numbers vary from area to area, some colleges have signed more than 100 Ukrainian students onto courses. And not just for ESOL. At least 1,200 students are on A-level or other post-GCSE courses. But it's not just about teaching English. College staff have also worked to provide other practical support such as free bus passes, lunch vouchers and loaned laptops. The full story can be found on the FE Week website. Finally, a new resource for secondary school-age pupils has been launched to encourage young people to consider a career in the veterinary professions. The British Veterinary Association has endorsed the Vet Team in a Box resource, produced by University of Liverpool. The resource is designed in line with the Key Stage 3 national curriculum and helps students participate in scenarios which aim to demystify the veterinary professions and remove perceived barriers to joining. The resource will be available later this month. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello! This week let's talk gadgets and tech that helps us teach, but also might be something to hint at for a gift in the near future. Before I start, I'd like to define tech as anything that's been made that makes a difference to how we interact with the world, usually for the better. A pencil or scissors, for example, are classed as tech in my definition. That being said, let's look at what a few internet searches have brought up as must-have tech for teachers. Mini whiteboards, a favourite of Nathan Ginn, have got to be super useful. Things to watch though is pens running out. Do you also need a cloth or a board rubber? And primary teachers, don't let the kids keep them in the trays with the books. They make them look messy and get ink all over them. Interactive screens. Are you team interactive or could you have had a big TV and spent the rest on other things? I love interactivity, but my subject lends itself to it. Are you simply presenting on an overpriced screen? Things to check out are open source interactive software that's compatible with different devices. Sometimes you can be locked in by software. Having something you can use on almost any board might be for you, especially if your school has a mixed estate of kit, and as it's open source, it will be free. The presentation clicker is a classic. Things to watch for is losing it, leaving the USB dongle behind, and also ensuring you don't use the built-in Class 3 laser to blind the class. Does anyone really use a laser pointer? A webcam, a topic I've discussed in the past. A decent webcam nowadays doesn't need to be expensive and can do as much as a visualizer. Think purpose and audience, then think desk space and the number of cables needed. What about simpler gadgets? Feedback stamps. With these, I'd just be certain the way feedback is given isn't going to change before you buy them to get value for money from the stamp. Ninja pens. Is it a ruler? Is it a pen? No, it's a spirit level and also a flat and cross-headed screwdriver. It looks cool, but if you get a cheap one, don't expect to be able to unscrew anything unless what you're unscrewing is made from cheese. As always, I'd love to hear about your favourite teaching tech. Let us know at TT Radio 2022. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Pterodactyl. Well, ladies and gentlemen, so we were going to have Toby talking for 10 minutes. Oh, he's back.
Oh, yeah.
Are you back?
I'm back. Oh,
Back in the
did
room.
I go? Did I disappear?
Well, I don't know. People, yeah. Lucy says he went from where I was standing. He disappeared.
Oh.
I just took the mic for a bit. It's fine. Carry on. Where were
Oh,
you?
poop. Right. Anyway, so I was going to talk for a bit. Ed was going to talk for a bit, and then people might ring in. And does the silence count as part?
It's not 3 minutes, Maxim. He was promising us 10. 10 of solid material. Oh, he's not gone again, has he? Okay, ladies and gentlemen. 10.
Move to a different part of the room.
While he's gone, would you like any more bird impressions before he comes back? If you could like to suggest a bird in the chat, I'll do my best to do an impression of it. Well,
I am back over here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, mate. Yeah.
Right,
You missed some bird impressions. They were good. Carry on.
I didn't miss any bird impressions. I missed you talking about threatening them. Okay, creativity. So I would describe myself, and this annoys people on Twitter, as a creative thinker. And I think I've got plenty of evidence and people who could support that, people I worked with in industry. And I'm intrigued about where it comes from. It's certainly not trained or nurtured in school. It's something that happens. It's probably partially genetic, like all forms of character and intelligence and so forth, I suspect. But it's not. I don't believe in genetic determinism, but a kind of genetic propensity. I had quite a kind of sort of very isolated childhood, so I had lots of time to imagine and wonder and stuff, and I sometimes whether that was a big factor in making me more creative, because I had to find ways of entertaining myself and so forth. But I think when we talk about creativity and creative thinking and being creative, they often get conflated with being sort of artistic. So being creative is producing something new or making something. Creativity is that sort of thing, but in the workplace. But it can also apply to maths and science and stuff. It doesn't have to just apply to art and etc. etc. It all gets a bit muddled up and confused. And I think when we have young children who are often, not always, not all young children are curious. Come on, let's be honest. But young children often are very curious and interested because they don't know very much, and so they want to know why. And young humans are naturally curious, and that curiosity does seem to dissipate as we go into adolescence. So I don't think that schools knocking it out of people. I think it's changes inside the humans' brains and stuff. But it's certainly true that schools don't necessarily continue to nurture that open-ended curiosity that is perhaps prevalent in early years, because we have hefty curricula to impart. And so I think that is an issue. What I really object to is this absolutely flawed notion that is prevalent amongst mainstream sort of trad direct instruction, current educational zeitgeist stuff, is that you can't be a creative thinker or a critical thinker until you know lots of stuff. Now, unfortunately, can you still hear me, Ed?
I can still hear you.
Good. I think. My headphones come out now. I can't hear myself. I think that there is a challenge in that idea. Now, most creative thinkers are quite clever people. But they're not creative thinkers because they're clever people. I think they're two separate things, right? So I think there are an awful lot of very, very purebred, very, very clever academic people who are experts, who know an awful lot about one field of study. I don't like the word domain, and they know an awful lot about this sort of stuff, but they can't necessarily think deeply about other things outside their expertise, and they become a little bit, sometimes, as brilliant and wonderful as they are, they can come a little bit sort of shackled by the sort of sanctity of their knowledge. And so you can keep teaching people loads and loads of stuff, and they can go and do undergraduate degrees and then postgraduate degrees, and they can do multiple postgraduate degrees and do postdoctoral research, but they're not necessarily ever going to become a sort of creative genius. They're just becoming more and more knowledgeable about less and less stuff. And they can work with other people who are equally knowledgeable, and they can be creative in those teams of people, but they're not necessarily creatively thinking or looking at problems from the outside. So I think people who are creative thinkers that I've worked with, and I would include myself in this, are quite good at just, asking really, really irritating questions. Creative thinkers are really irritating people. They may well be a little bit on the sort of ADHD spectrum as well. They're very, very quick, active minds that are darting all over the place and are challenging perhaps the status quo a lot of the time. And that's not very much appreciated sometimes in the classroom, because there's a curriculum to get through and there's exams to prepare for and so forth. So I think that education should spend a bit more time nurturing those creative thinkers, because I think an awful lot of those creative thinkers have a lot to offer society and work and life, but sometimes they do get suppressed at school.
Never mind. I can't let you in if you'd like to come in and join with me. I don't know. Anybody got any comments on what Toby was saying there? It seems to me, on the one hand, sort of self-evident. On the other hand, slightly, I think he's slightly wrong on some of that. So there's some of the stuff he's saying, people becoming very deep in their domain.
That's probably my time up.
He's back. Sorry, carry on.
My time up, really. I think that's all I wanted to sort of.
We lost the last 2 minutes, mate. You disappeared.
Oh dear.
Oh
gosh.
You lost the last 2 minutes. You were saying sort of yada yada yada, domain specific, yada yada, getting stuck too far into particular fields of knowledge, so you're not making connections across. Saying that you sort of got to the point where you were going to say, you're saying education needs to give time to, I think you were going to say, working between disciplines and making connections and readying the brain for that.
Yeah, exactly. Work. Letting it we're too obsessed in education, and this was true before the direct instruction, knowledge-rich revolution. This was still true then. We are obsessed about subject knowledge and subject silos, and I was talking to someone. Yeah,
domain specific skills.
And it's I think it's really, I don't know, because most people who study these really specific bits of knowledge until 16 or until 18 don't go on to study it further. Very, very few people become academic experts in one narrow field of one subject. And so, and yet our whole education system is set up to focus on that pathway. And I think this is a fundamental misunderstanding between education and industry and academia as well. Actually, is that I find it weird. I'm not suggesting, though, that we throw out subjects and that we're constantly doing project-based learning all the time, and we're probably doing discovery learning all the time, and we're constantly trying to find the connections where maybe there aren't connections. That's not, and also I acknowledge that an awful lot of people are never going to, just like an awful lot of people are never going to grow up to become a professor of mathematics at Imperial College or a professor of geology at wherever, Harvard. Just a lot of people aren't going to grow up to become creative thinkers either. A lot of people aren't going to grow up, so I think obviously school has to balance, the needs of everybody, and that's really challenging because we do have different needs and wants and whims. But I think I don't know, but that's all I wanted to sort of talk about really, is also the idea. If you're a creative thinker as an adult, is that the same type of creativity and creative thinking as being a very curious child? And I'm not. I think in the education space and amongst teachers, I think we sometimes think that it is, but I think it's quite different. I think an awful lot of young children are curious and interested and wonder about the world because they've not been constrained or put into a box yet, and we put them into a box too early in this country, in my opinion. but I think that's quite a different thing. I mean, someone who's a creative thinker and a curious inventor or problem solver as an adult was likely to be a curious child, but not all curious children or creative children become creative adults. And I think that's just interesting. I don't know. I'm not. There's nothing. It's very inconclusive what I'm saying. I'm just find it interesting that people's hackles get up on this topic so much, and that everything in school education favours the fairly quickly forgotten content of subject-based curricula, and poo-poos or dismisses the need to just think a bit more open-endedly and to explore things and not worry about getting the right answer or worry about how to answer a question in an exam, which is not a skill that is ultimately useful to you as a working adult. So I think it all gets a bit, the debate in it gets a bit messy. Anyway, I've spoken for long enough, Ed. So did you want to pick up or challenge anything I said, or have you got your own opinions and insights on this stuff?
So, well, I do think. I think what you're saying, the difference between creativity, what we see as that creative young child, and what we then go on to prize as creativity in adults. I think it is a different beast, and I think children, quite a lot of them, see through it as well. So, children who can write you a delightful story about their pet dragons and how they went on a trip to the seaside with them, get fussed and praised as being terribly, terribly, terribly creative. But in actual fact, an awful lot of it is it's terrible guff,
Yeah.
People say, the children wrote this marvellous poem. I'm going to put it on Twitter, this marvellous poem the children wrote. And you'll look at it, I'll go, good heavens, they've used Kit Wright's magic box again and changed just a couple of the adjectives. So children are smart creatures, and a lot of them are very good at pleasing the adults with this sort of apparent creativity. Whereas a truly creative child who just does I've got a kid in year 6 at the moment who just astonishes me, but he doesn't astonish me much in lessons. He astonishes me by coming in with this beautiful things he makes with his hands. I mean, he's learnt the skills from somewhere. So much of what we term creativity in general, is skills. I'm not going to say it's knowledge we learn. I say it's skills. So that I love doing a lino cut, and I do not think I'm good at it, and I don't pretend I am. It's just something I enjoy doing.
You're better than me.
By people who are good at it. And I look at it and go, actually, there's a bunch of skills you've learned there, and some of the skills with the hands, some of the understanding how colours are going to look together, some of it's learning ways of looking at the world and seeing what's going to make a good subject. It's learnable. It's different, I think, from an astonishing mathematician, who can see the world through that extraordinary code and reread it. Maybe they would say it isn't. Maybe they'd say it's skills I've learned. I just don't know this ultimately that very useful a word, creativity, because we mean very different things by it. Describing Picasso as creative, and then describing
Einstein.
I don't know, the inventor James Dyson. They're both creative, but they are. Creativity doesn't get me very much further. They're both very creative. Well, yeah, they created stuff. What do we mean? What are you talking about? So if we say we want to put it at our school's curriculum, when we have our ideal school together, Toby, you and me, and at the centre of the curriculum is this.
Very soon, I hope, Ed. Very soon.
Yeah, it's very hard to imagine what we actually mean by it, because I think we do mean very different things by it if we're in a science classroom or an art classroom or an English
Absolutely. Classroom. I think that's the thing, is that, I suppose if we think about our most famous polymath, Leonardo da Vinci, when I say he's not mine, but Leonardo da Vinci was he looked at science with the eye of an artist, and he looked at art with the eye of a sort of scientist mathematician, and so he could draw and study water from look at it from an artistic behavior, but also from a very mathematical behavior, and that's obviously rare. That level of deep intellect.
To that extent, it is. He is an outlier there, but I mean, there was less science to know back then, wasn't there?
There was.
You could know almost everything there is to know within a human lifetime. Probably that's nonsense, but it's definitely definitely not true now.
Oh yeah, no, he was pre-Newton, pre-Galileo, pre-everybody.
I mean, you know lots of proper scientists. I know a few because some people I was good friends with at university went on to be proper scientists, you know. And I'm thinking about them. They're all the ones that I really cared about, who I thought were interesting. All of them were polymathic to a degree. I remember Mark Mirdovnik, who's a reasonably well-known popular scientist now and head of all sorts of material science boards. I think he's at UCU. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
When I knew him, he was into his music, he was into sketching, he was into filmmaking, he was into all sorts of stuff as well as material science.
Absolutely.
I think it's still true that really creative, interesting scientists still tend to be people who are also going to the opera and.
Yes, and that's right. They're deeply artistic as well, and the art infuses with their life, or and maybe absolutely they've just got sort of great complex minds. But there's equally there are an awful lot of very, very talented scientists and mathematicians who are very much on the sort of spectrum and are very, very black and white and aren't that sort of shades of grey artsy sort of insight and so that's probably true in all fields of life. But I think that's one of the things that's quite interesting in school is I think, and I get a lot of pushback. I've had a lot of pushback on Twitter in the past. Well, maybe science and maths aren't very creative at school. But they go to English lessons and they go to art lessons and they discuss things in history. And so that side of the brain is sort of trained there, if you like.
True, though,
but I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true because I think English becomes, well, unless you perhaps do English literature, A level maybe. There's a lot of rules to learn and a lot of ways to answer the question and ways to
learning how to answer questions for the exam. And
Yeah.
I think the school that my kid goes to, I think, is a terrific school and doing a great job, and he'll come out of it with a very strong collection of GCSEs, and that's really important. You need those because you want to do the next thing and the next thing. But when he tells me about, he's not finished it now, but when he was telling me about his English literature GCSE, I just felt pretty sad.
Yeah.
Pretty sad.
And
that
was a conversation I had.
Very, very much have been used to. This is how you answer this sort of question. This is how you answer that sort of question.
I had a conversation today with someone who works at Imperial College, not a scientist, but is a sort of involved in sort of outreach and stuff at Imperial College, and he was talking to me and said that some professors or senior researchers at Imperial, when they're selecting their students for PhD, often prefer students with a 2-1 rather than a first, because the people who get firsts and A stars and 9s, while some of them may be underlying creative geniuses, they are often they're just very, very good at preparing for exams and very conscientious, and maybe they're blessed with great memory or retrieval skills or whatever it is. But sometimes I think that's it. A truly creative thinker, a creative child, is a bit of a difficult thing to control. Sorry? They don't want anyone with 2 2s, no. but
oh, that's all right. Sorry about that. Oh, has he gone? Has he gone again, friends? It does make me chuckle. I hope that's all right. So while Toby's gone, has anybody got any interesting recipes that they've been cooking this week? I've just made my famous chorizo stew. Shall we have a look, see what Rachel's been chipping in? Or should we just get Rachel in?
Let's get. Is Rachel Snitz? No.
Rachel Higginson at Creative Hig.
Is Rachel Creative Hig? Rachel Higginson's listening. Rachel, do you want to join us? Hi, how are you?
I'm feeling fascinated by your chat.
It's quite freewheeling. It's the freewheeling Bob Dylan with gaps.
So shall I give you my 10 pence worth?
Come on, well, no, give us your 50 pence worth.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So from everything I've learned about creativity has been the bane of my life for the last 6 years. because it is, for me, everything that's missing in education. But it is, as Ed said, really misrepresented in the way the word is interpreted by people. So, I've been on a really big journey of sort of embracing it and then trying to move away from it. And now I'm kind of back in a really safe, happy place with creativity. And I think what we need to understand is that research shows that young people and how they interact with the world, if you look at them in EYFS, are inherently creative. And research shows that a very, very high percentage of children are very naturally creative. It's not that you're born creative or not. It is actually a really natural human trait. But over time, as buckets of research to show that once children start formal education, that sit down, listen to me, education, that declines quite rapidly to the point that there's only then a very small percentage of adults who are naturally still really in that creative space in their lives, in the way in which they interact with the world and behave in their careers and their personal life. That's not to say adults aren't creative and enjoy being creative. It's just those people who are really naturally in that space. And the other thing that came up was also what is creativity, and the most helpful definition is from a report called The Innovator's DNA, and that piece of work describes creativity as a set of behaviours, which I think is a really helpful lens to look at creativity through. Those behaviours being making links, connections, questioning everything. Creative people are really good at questioning, networking, and experimenting, and that is that beautiful play element of creativity, which I think is so important in many formal careers, as you've alluded to. Play in a lab is really pertinent and important. So it's something that I think about deeply all the time, and that's my 50 pence worth for you, Toby.
That was good. That was. I'd say it's about 25 pence worth. You could say more. Harsh.
Well, considering I'm sat on the sofa by the fire in my onesie, thinking my evening was done, I was just going to sit back and listen. Yeah, well, it is my Chewbacca onesie, actually.
Yeah, but now I know I've got the voice of. I know she's going to listen back. She wanted to call in, but she couldn't. She sent a message on Twitter. I know Alison Honeybone, who has debated this with me at length on Twitter, I don't know whether she'd disagree with what you've said, because I completely agree with what you said, Rachel. But I think what Alison has sort of said is that in countries, if it's true that schools or formal education does stifle creativity, if that's true, then there would be no creative people in countries where there's formal education, because but whereas actually, but then, and our debate, Alice and my debate, was about some of the really famous, and these are tiny percentages of people, the Newtons and the Einsteins and the and the Blaise Pascals and whoever's, who were really, really creative, mathematicians and philosophers and deep thinkers, but they, she was saying that they still had a sort of formal education, but they sort of predate formal education. Those guys, don't they?
Absolutely. I think that's because creativity doesn't disappear, and the ability to then regain your creative skills and confidence is always there. So that's sort of the cultural environments that those people are within, and that's being nurtured within, Google. Anywhere, the Tesco boardroom, if somebody's nurturing that and allowing you to grow that confidence, it can come back in bucket loads. But I think the point is for me, I think I don't go against the need for rigor in education and knowledge. I think we should have a knowledge-rich classroom. But I think for me, it's about being really conscious in the way in which you have that rigor within your curriculum, but you also have that, space for deepening learning and allowing young people to really explore and get to know themselves through creativity. And, a great way of applying that knowledge-rich stuff to developing and innovating new products and ideas. There's so many ways pedagogically in which you can have both what's the traditional and the progressive working in perfect harmony together. I just think that we need to work to find that place.
Yeah, I think, and the question for you on that is that, do you visit a lot of schools and work with a lot of schools and a lot of trusts and so forth? Do you is this sort of idea that a lot of schools or a lot of the current educational zeitgeist is a bit scared of creativity and hence the reaction to the Blunkett report from some people, or is that just a tiny little pocket of Twitter that likes to kick off occasionally?
No, I think to some extent that sort of kickback is not in context with the Blunkett report at all. But I think sometimes we can become a little too free and fluid, and when you lose that structure, you can have a system that doesn't have outcomes that are useful to young people, and that's certainly not what I'm suggesting. So what I talk about in schools and what really gets a buzz from I've never presented on this and not had people really excited is the concept that within our education system we need to be really mindful of that which is good and that which is not good, and we're really conscious, or we perhaps are inwardly feeling this needs to change. We need to be more brave and confident at being social disruptives. And that's that when you use creativity to become innovators, and the only way our system will progress, not necessarily a progressive in the prog term, but progress in line with society, is if we do acknowledge our role as social disruptives. And I think that for me, in my experience, I've never spoken about that in any trust or school I've been invited into. And people haven't got really excited about their professional responsibility to progress the system. But Toby, you have to remember that people do know I'm Creative Hig, and they might be inviting that too. Yeah. Well, sometimes I throw it in when I've not been invited to talk about that as well, and people still like it.
I think we all feel it, don't we? We all feel the need to disrupt, and we all feel that I've got so many people who blame the national curriculum, and I don't really think it was a national curriculum, but it's a good bugbear. We all feel constrained one way or another, and I think we all feel even more constrained one way or another in the current educational climate and
of course
budget climate as well.
Absolutely.
We feel there's so little we can do. We feel quite powerless. We feel a lack of agency. So someone who speaks to us of agency, it gets the blood flowing. The question is how you make it real day to day when you've still got the current inspection framework, which wasn't meant to do what it's done, but it's done it. And when you've got, a long list of subjects that you have to get through, and which you've been told you need to write, a sequenced scheme for, to the extent where, people are looking at it and they look from the first day of term, they know what every lesson's going to be to the last day of term. When you say, go out, leave a couple of lessons a week free, friends, so that you can follow a tangent, they look at you with hollow eyes and laugh, We all know we want to deliver this. I don't think I know a primary school teacher who doesn't want to do this, but I think we all look at the situation we're in and wonder how we can.
What about the primary schools are generally, better at nurturing and tapping into this partly because of the age of the children, partly because there's no exams in anything other than English and maths in terms of SATs and so forth, and so you're not there, and also the children are largely until maybe year 6, largely sort of pre-adolescent, and so not they're more open. Then they're not our minds do close down, and we become rather self-obsessed, don't we, during adolescence, and so but then my problem is key stage 3 in our current world, is that and in science and in maths, key stage 3 becomes foundational to key stage 4, the really meaty GCSEs, and in science, which is this why space is such an important topic, because you can explore it and go deeper, and it's fascinating. As an adult, I'm not super fascinated by it, but in a classroom, it's so you can take it in any direction and nurture the sort of creative thinking and just exploring and curiosity. But by the time you do space in secondary, it's a series of facts that need to be learnt for an exam, and it's not, and all that sort of imagining and trying to understand or explain what a black hole is, if you care, is lost really a bit. And I think that's a big problem, is that key stage 3 should be an extension of upper key stage 2 in terms of sort of just rather than obsessing about sort of foundational subject concepts, a bit more discussion, a bit more creativity, a bit more open-endedness. But ultimately, schools, you might have some really, I think that's the problem, is that science teachers are generally not very creative, whereas scientists are quite creative, right? And so there's quite a difference between the two.
Listening, you'd like to take a pop at that.
They might take a pop at it, and they can take a pop at it if they want to. And I know I'm unpopular with a few of them. Sorry, Richard, because I know he's a loyal listener. But equally, there are different ways of being great at science, and not all of them are creative.
Well, there's also different ways of being creative as well.
Yeah, exactly,
so I think you can perceive creative as sort of zany pedagogy, and actually that's doing creativity a disservice. The brilliant creativity is just when you're really embracing, really thinking deeply and thinking about things in a new way. And interestingly, Toby, I was having a conversation with Mary Myatt this morning about Key Stage 3 being the powerhouse of the school, and how that is just such a beautiful opportunity to really deepen concepts and get the really rich pedagogy in before it all gets very serious again. Exactly. And I think you're totally right.
And that's the same conversation I had with the Imperial College Director of Outreach today as well, is that looking at there's a lot of pressure on universities to get to pre-16 and to kind of try and, but not I know there's a lot we can discuss around that, but I think is that everything becomes such an exam treadmill at 16 and then 18, and of course in the real world, and I know education is not just about future jobs, but or shouldn't just be about future jobs, but it's the sort of broadening minds and raising awareness of if you're really interested in sound, or sound technician, and like that sort of stuff, you should be exploring things like that, rather than just the fundamental box tick physics facts about the difference between amplitude and frequency or whatever. Just actually, let's not worry so much about whether you fundamentally understand the few core facts at key stage 3. Let's make it a bit more, I think that's my thing. I'll be totally honest, I don't think I'm really a teacher. I'm an inspirer, and I think that's I'm not, I struggle with this. I think that's my job, and maybe that's why I find the teaching profession quite challenging, is because I just want to open people's minds and inspire them and excite them about stuff, and rather worrying about whether they've learnt it or mastered it or can get it in an exam is not really why I do the job, and therefore I'm not very popular sometimes, because unfortunately, the job is about getting those grades or those progress figures or those whatevers.
It's hard though when you're considering that this is about social equity as well. So, for all of our colleagues that are working really hard and perhaps becoming more rigorous than we would like, I think I try to be mindful and empathise with the fact that it comes from a really strong desire to create a more equal society and for our most disadvantaged children to, get a hoik up the ladder to their rightful place. And then I think it becomes really complex as an education debate. That's not to say I don't believe the same things, but I get it. I get what people want to achieve.
I do get that, but I suppose my point is that if you are focused solely on improving results in order to break down glass ceilings and so forth, and for that social equity, but those children in those disadvantaged areas aren't exposed to the inspirational people, or they don't doing the university visit or the school trip and I know I'm really cynical about the one day sort of really exciting STEM workshop
Me too.
when the other 3 years
are just
dry learn the curriculum. That doesn't work. It's got to be, but what we sort of need is not just improving the grades from people from disadvantaged backgrounds, but increasing their exposure to the things that the affluent middle classes are exposed to routinely as well. So the inspirational people, the on a regular basis, not just the great teacher. And I think that's a real challenge. And that's me being utopian. But there you go.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. But I think what I would say about those rigorous curriculums and I really hear Ed. I hear your pain. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I'm sorry. I was just saying I hear Ed's pain. Sorry, my phone's doing some funny things.
You hear Ed's pain. Is Ed in pain?
Yeah, I mean, with his curriculum and the pressures that brings, because I think the point I would make about, really driving for those results is it may to some extent be missing the point of shaping, really resilient, confident young people with agency who can take those grades and do something really powerful with them and also lead successful, joyful lives.
I was talking to Dan, who's my boss, yesterday about this, and talking about, not just in my school, but across the trust, and we think across the sector, what it's looking like in year 3 at the moment, where we have a lot of children who they had really disrupted experiences. I think they're the most in primary, the most damaged year group by the experience of the pandemic.
Sure, yeah.
And we're looking at them, and they just don't know enough stuff to be interested in stuff.
Wow.
There's bits missing. There's vocabulary. Like somebody did a bit of research, and they just don't have the vocabulary that they would have had 3 years ago in that year group. And so there's something really intentional about saying, actually, we're not doing knowledge curriculum because we're obsessed with knowledge or because we've signed up to some great movement. We're doing it because we want to put enough stuff into the kids' heads and enough vocabulary into their mouths that when we put something new in there, it's got hooks. Do you know what
Absolutely,
I mean?
and that's so important. Yeah,
that is true. That is true.
Now than it ever has been.
Yeah,
it's not my natural way of being. As a teacher and as a school leader. It's not really kind of who I think I am. Is but I really respect it. I think I want them to know enough stuff that they can be interested in stuff, and I want that because I want them to be able to speak freely and creatively and authentically from themselves. I don't think you can do that until you've got the vocabulary and the breadth of experience. So, yes, I find it quite irritating that I'm looking at this and going, well, I've got a 6-week half term and there's 6 weeks of geography I've got to deliver, and there's nowhere all that, it's hard to fit in the hook lesson and it's hard to fit in the experience because we've got so much to teach. And then at the other end of it, you're going, yes, but there's so much for them to learn, and we've curated what we want them to learn, and we thought about it, and we really want them to know it because it's going to make sense when we're picking it up next year. So I'm absolutely torn down the middle. Absolutely.
I think there's something about the enactment. Sorry. Yeah.
I don't think,
Yeah.
whether it's my lino cutting, I get better at it the more I learn, or whether it's putting scientific ideas together. You have to have stuff to bang together to make.
You need the proficiency. Yeah, absolutely.
I totally am split down the middle as well, but I will bang the. But the only question that I have that is the elephant in the room of, yes, we know that to be successful and creative in as an adult in whatever line of work or line of hobby you have, you need to know.
Oh, he's gone again. You still there?
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Poor Toby's been dropping in and out all afternoon, and he was going to say something wonderful, wasn't he?
Oh, we've got you back, Toby. Repeat that.
Sorry, I just repeat that. Sorry, I just think that I think the idea that increasing knowledge, that we have, by age 11, by age 16, is really key to being able to be engaged and discuss this stuff and become a creative adult in whatever line of work or hobby we may have, is what I was saying. But we can't ever get away from the fact that huge swathes of the population, including this particularly above average intellectual creative thinker that's speaking too much now, we forget most of that knowledge very, very quickly, and we never apply it. And so we become, so whilst we know that increasing knowledge increases opportunity and increases able to acquire more knowledge and to interact with more people, it's a hugely, I know this is really controversial, but it's a hugely inefficient system, because 6 months after we've sat the GCSEs in physics, chemistry and biology, if we don't go on to study it further, it's all gone, and that knowledge is therefore not useful knowledge, because it's we spent too much time learning some fundamental physics and learning some fundamental biology, and it's all gone. It's never used.
You haven't had enough retrieval practice.
No, yeah, all right, but you can have retrieval practice all day, every day, but then if you don't keep retrieving it after the bloody exam, then it's gone. So it's only been a means to an end. It's only been a means to an end.
You're absolutely right. Can I also ask, David, just for the sake of looking like the smarty pants here, were we ever going to play the news in this program, or have we...
Oh my gosh!
I don't know if we were, because my obviously I'm having some technical issues. So we're going to play the news, and then we're going to come back for some music, Ed. Yes, I'm going to try and play the news. Now, Rachel,
I'm going to say goodbye then. Thank you so much for forcing me.
Thank you very much, Creative Hig, who works for Myatt & Co. and does wonderful stuff. And Ed and I both know Rachel too. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Rachel, and thank you. Parking near your house on Saturday. I might knock on your door and say.
Well, it'd be lovely. Come and have a cup of coffee. All right, boys. Have a lovely evening. Bye.
Right. I'm going to say here is the news and see if it works. Technical issues. Okay. Right. I now.
Here's the news. Read the script.
News. I'm going to do a plug for our sponsors, the Witherslack Group. I've lost my script. Can I find my script? Probably not easily. So there's the Witherslack Group, there's the Oxford University Press.
Listen, if you're listening to this, then we know we have at least one thing in common. That is a love of learning or something. Is that the one?
Yes, a love of learning. We do have that.
I think it's a big assumption, but carry on. And so, anything else?
I mean, Tom might edit this show afterwards and pin on the news afterwards. Yeah. I don't know what's happened with my computer. I have got too many children in the house with too much other Wi-Fi going on, and it's also been really, really, really horribly rainy, and that does tend to affect these sort of things a bit. And maybe my computer's a little bit full of other stuff too. I don't know.
Time to clear the cache. Have you defragged it recently?
Defragged it? I haven't
could do the
defragged
tech
it. No, I haven't
update.
turned it off and on recently either. That sometimes helps, doesn't it? Just a simple
Doesn't
off
it?
and on can sort these things out.
Yeah, you have to cycle it. That's
I
what
have to
it's called.
cycle it. Anyway, everybody. Well, that was good. Have you got anything you'd like to say about it, Ed?
About defragging.
Defragging. About, I think,
About creativity.
yeah.
No, I think we gave it. We had a heated debate, didn't we? We kicked it around a little bit. We decided we didn't know what it was, but we liked it. We thought we'd have more of it, but it's quite hard to squeeze it in. I think that's what
Snit
we.
PC. I've invited Snit in. Snit's been trying to join. Snit PC. Who is Snit PC? Good evening. You're now a speaker.
Hello,
Who is hello?
it's Christine.
Christine. challenge me.
Christine! Hi! How are you? You've muted yourself.
Oh,
I'm not very
come
good.
on, Christine.
I'm going to put a spanner in the works here because I think that, in primary, this is really good. But actually, what I think is the problem? I think the problem is that people do not connect subjects up. That's your problem with innovation.
Yes, I agree.
People teach to exams, and life is not about exams. Life is not about have an answer for a question, because life isn't like that. What happens if you don't get that question and then you have to think outside the box?
Yeah. I think
What I find, because I'm very much HE, and what I find very sad is that people do not know how to critically think. They don't know how to critically read. They don't know how to critically evaluate. They don't know how to critically analyze. And you can't teach that. What you can do is that knowledge is power, but power is nothing without application. So what you have to do is you have to put a scenario in where you get kids to apply that knowledge to a real life conceptualized situation, that they can actually see the relevance of that knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I would agree. We don't spend enough time critically thinking, but then the naysayers, the counter us, would say that the sort of critical thinking, creative thinking, which are overlaid concepts, I suppose, are you'd say that you can't. It's not easy to critically think about things until you know quite a lot, and it's a bit like teaching kids about mortgages or tax system, or
Toby, you've gone.
He's gone again. He's been having a nightmare, isn't he?
He has been having a nightmare. But do you know what I'm talking?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The thing is that when I teach like science and I teach cells, I will get the students to make cells out of sweets. Then I will get them to think about the sweets that they pick for certain organelles, and why did they pick that? What is that structure like that for that function that it does? And that visual, that actually getting them involved in making something, in creating something, then gets them to think about, the cell as something almost that they can actually make and actually see.
But we might have to defer that discussion, because I've got quite a lot to say about that, because I think sometimes, I think we're gonna that's really interesting. That I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I'm not sure converting fundamental biology into craft is necessarily always helps people learn or understand it? And also, does everybody need to understand a cell anyway? That's my bigger point. But I completely agree with you about the subjects becoming too siloed and too separate and not connected. And often the language of geography is quite different to the language of chemistry in an exam, but yet in the real world they overlay completely. In the geological parts of geography. Anyway, thank you, Christine, for calling in. That's really good, and I think that's really interesting one to pick up on the sort of infusing creative tasks with complex concepts. Is that a good thing or a bad thing or an indifferent thing? I don't know. I think that's a whole other conversation. So I don't know if you can hear me, everybody. Still, Ed. We couldn't do the news. We couldn't do the adverts. With a Slack group, Oxford Union Press. You've been listening to Ed and Toby on Teachers Talk Radio, and I've been cutting in and out. You're going to play us some music, Ed.
I wonder if I've been cutting in and out. Have I?
I don't know. I think it's mainly me, but who knows?
Who knows? We don't know. Is there anyone still with us?
There are online still 10 people. There've been a total of 22 people involved in the show. Hello, Mrs. P. How are you doing?
I'm just tuning up, which I haven't done for a while. Bad. Toby's gone. Before we started, Toby was doing some tweets, wasn't he? He was saying, I don't know what is creativity, what is it for, where is it gone, and all that sort of thing. And somebody, was it Lucy, said, it sounds like Cotton Eye Joe. So I thought I'd have a go at Cotton Eye Joe, but not the Cotton Eye Joe that you're expecting, because I am a creative maverick and because I can't bear it, so I'm going for the Michelle Shocked one instead, which I've never played in my life. I'm making up the chords, so I hope I get away with it. What's to be done with a prodigal son? Welcome him home with open arms. Throw a big party, invite your friends. Our boys come back home. When a girl comes home with the oats he's sown is, draw your shades and your shudders. She's bringing such shame to the family name. The return of the prodigal daughter, singing, "Oh, Cotton Eye Joe." Went to the doctor and I almost died. When I told my mama, Lordy, how she cried. Me and my daddy were never too close. He was there when I needed him most. Look, here comes the prodigal son, fetch him a tall glass of water, but there's none in the cup because he drank it all up. Left for the prodigal daughter, singing, "Oh, Cotton Eye Joe. Oh, Cotton Eye Joe. Hadn't been for the Cotton Eye Joe, I'd have been married a long time ago. Oh, I'd have been married a long time ago."
Hey,
that's what you're getting tonight. Lovely song.
Lovely. That's a much nicer version. Could you hear me?
I can hear you. It's beautiful.
Oh, good. Well done, Ed. Thank you very much. Well, we have, in a very circular and creative way, discussed various bits of things. I think there's probably a few gaps in some of the stuff I wanted to try and get across, but those will come to me in the week and we can talk about them next week, including some of that stuff that Christine was talking about at the end there as well. So thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you for coping with my glitchiness. And I hope that was intriguing and it's inconclusive, I'm sure. I'm going to see if I can play the exit music. Thank you, Ed, as well. And speak to you soon, guys.
Speak to you soon.
Bye. No, I can't do the end music. So, you've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio, the Late Late Show with Toby Payne-Cook and Ed Finch, and we've been talking about creativity and creative thinking and all that malarkey, and we'll be back next week to talk about some more stuff, and then it'll be getting close to Christmas when we will start to think about our books and recommended book lists and recommended this, that, and the others for Christmas, and get a little less educational and get a little bit more frivolous. Thank you very much for listening. Good night, everybody.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.